My mother-in-law did not ask whether Ryan and Chloe could use the studio. That would have required the possibility of no. What she did instead was arrive 12 minutes early, stand in the middle of the room I had been paying for since before Claire understood what her business cost, and speak as if the decision had already been made somewhere else. Somewhere I had not been invited. The candles were already lit when she walked in. Claire always did that last. She moved through the studio in those final minutes with a kind of controlled tenderness, touching everything lightly, turning it 2 inches, stepping back, reconsidering, turning it back again. The ivory pillar on the windowsill. The amber glass candle near the corner shelf. The dried pampas in the white ceramic vase. Everything arranged until the room looked as if nothing in it had ever required labor. That was Claire's gift. She could make effort disappear. The late afternoon light came through the linen curtains the way she liked it. Soft, forgiving, almost weightless. On camera, it made the studio look inevitable. The kind of place people assumed a woman like Claire simply ended up in because beauty recognized her and opened a door. I was at the folding table behind her, working through the lease renewal and 3 separate service reminders on my laptop. The folding table was technically for client paperwork, but most of the paperwork on it was mine. Insurance, vendor contracts, tax notes, equipment records, the sort of things no one photographed unless something went wrong. Does the ring light need charging before tomorrow? Claire asked, without turning around. I did it this morning. And Mrs. Harmon? The consultation. Confirmed. It's in the calendar. She moved the vase again, then back. I watched her from behind the screen. She looked tired in the exact way people call serene when the lighting is good enough. Her phone buzzed on the shelf. She read the message, read it again, then placed the phone face down with the kind of care that told me she was pretending not to react. I did not ask. By then, I already knew the shape of her family's interruptions. Her mother never entered a room without rearranging its air. Ryan never arrived without some emergency he insisted was temporary. Chloe never said she needed anything directly if there was a softer way to make everyone else feel responsible. And Claire became very gentle whenever one of them started taking up space. It was not quite agreement. That would have been cleaner. It was more like surrender disguised as empathy. Her mother came first, exactly as expected. She stood in the doorway and took the studio in with a slow look I recognized immediately. Not admiration. Assessment. It's very you, she said to Claire. Not quite a compliment. Not quite not one. Ryan came in behind her looking at his phone, already bored with the inconvenience of other people's lives. Chloe followed, her eyes moving over the lighting rig and the editing desk with a calculation she probably thought was subtle. I had set no place for myself in that calculation. That was my mistake. Or maybe it had been my mistake for years. Claire had set the table beautifully. Good plates, cloth napkins, water glasses that caught the candlelight and threw small warm circles against the ceiling. She cared about details like that. She cared about atmosphere. She believed a room could be managed into peace if every object knew its place. Her family believed the same thing about people. Dinner began harmlessly enough. Ryan talked about his rental space downtown and the dispute with his landlord over a late payment that was, according to Claire's mother, not really his fault. Chloe mentioned her client list outgrowing her home setup. Their problem was presented in soft pieces, never as an ask, never as a demand. Just as weather. Something everyone had to adapt to. Claire nodded at the right moments. Her mother spoke smoothly, reasonably, with the patient confidence of someone who had already decided where sympathy should land. Then she looked around the studio. You've built that here, she said to Claire, warmth gathering in her voice like stage light. It would be a shame for it to sit half empty when your brother is struggling. The table went quiet. I remember looking first at Ryan. He did not look surprised. He looked uncomfortable, which meant he had known enough to be ashamed but not enough to stop it. Chloe stared at her plate. Claire's hand closed around her water glass. She did not lift it. I waited. It is embarrassing, the number of seconds hope can survive on almost nothing. Claire could have said, Mom, this is Daniel's studio too. She could have said, we cannot offer something that is not ours to give. She could have said, Ryan and Chloe need help, but this is not the way. Any one of those sentences would have changed the room. Not fixed everything. Not healed 3 years of imbalance. But changed it. Instead, she looked down at her plate and said softly, Mom is probably just thinking out loud. She only wants to help. I set my fork down. There are moments in a marriage that do not look dramatic from the outside. No one throws anything. No one raises a voice. No one walks out. A fork touches a plate. A woman chooses the easiest silence. A man stops believing that being understood is just one conversation away. I did not say another word for the rest of the meal. Claire did not either. I think she told herself that meant we were on the same side. After they left, I went to the kitchen for water and stood at the counter with the glass in my hand. I was not angry then. Anger would have been warmer. I felt the way I feel when a contract clause suddenly explains the entire agreement. Still, focused, disappointed by the clarity. Claire came in quietly. She just worries about Ryan, she said. You know how she gets. I looked at her for a moment. Then I asked, do you know who's on the lease for the studio? She blinked. What? The studio lease. The monthly agreement. Do you know whose name is on it? The answer was there in the pause before she spoke, or did not speak. I had expected it, which made it worse. There's also the equipment insurance, I said. The website hosting. The booking software. The accountant who handles your business taxes. The standing order for the lighting rig service contract. She stared at me as if I had started speaking a language she had once planned to learn and then never had to. I'm not telling you this so you'll thank me, I said. I'm telling you because you don't know. And I'm asking if that's actually true. Claire's face changed then. Not into guilt. Not yet. More like the confusion of someone reaching for a step that should have been there and finding the floor lower than expected. You're so good at those things, she said. I didn't want to interfere. There it was. The sentence that explained 3 years. She had not wanted to interfere with the lease that protected her business. She had not wanted to interfere with the insurance that protected her equipment. She had not wanted to interfere with the taxes, the hosting, the software, the repairs, the renewals, the cards, the transfers, the quiet monthly arithmetic that kept her beautiful room from becoming exactly what it had always been underneath, for walls, rented space, and a pile of obligations with my name attached. I nodded. Not because I accepted it, because I finally believed it. Claire had not lied when she told people she built the studio from scratch. That was the part that hurt most. She had said it because she had arranged the visible world so completely that the invisible one stopped existing to her. I went back to the studio after she went to bed. The candles had burned low. The room smelled like bergamot and cedar, an expensive calm. I sat at the folding table, opened the lease file, and read my own name as if I were seeing it for the first time. Daniel Whitmore. Guarantor. Account holder. Policy holder. Authorized user. Primary contact. Over and over. There is a particular humiliation in discovering that the proof you matter has existed all along, but only in documents no one cared enough to read. I did not sleep much that night. When I did come to bed, Claire was curled on her side with one hand tucked under her cheek. She looked peaceful. That used to soften me immediately. I had spent years protecting that peace. Paying early so she never saw a late notice. Replacing broken pieces before she knew they were broken. Moving through problems in advance so the path in front of her stayed clean. I used to think that was love. Maybe it was. But love that makes one person disappear eventually becomes something else. By morning, I had made a list. Not a dramatic one. Not a revenge list. A factual list. Lease. Insurance. Hosting. Scheduling software. Business phone number. Cloud storage. Equipment service contract. Accounting retainer. Payment cards. Backups. Access credentials. Everything tied to me. Everything Claire used. Everything her mother had treated as family property while not knowing the first thing about how it stayed alive. I did not cancel anything immediately. That matters. I know the version Claire's mother would prefer. In that version, I threw a tantrum because she spoke the truth. I punished Claire because my ego was wounded. I proved I was never family by refusing to share. But that is not what happened. I checked service terms. I downloaded client records. I exported schedules. I made sure nothing personal was touched. I created backups where backups were necessary. I separated Claire's content from the systems I paid for. I gave notice where notice could be given. I did the administrative work of leaving as carefully as I had once done the administrative work of staying. That was the part her mother would never understand. She thought labor was loyalty only while it benefited her children. The first cancellation email would reach Claire on Tuesday. I knew the wording because I had read it before confirming the account change. Access will end in 48 hours. Not immediately. Not cruelly. 48 hours was enough time to retrieve what needed retrieving. Enough time to call customer service and hear the same truth I had been living inside for years. She was not the account holder. I was. The scheduling platform went first because it was the easiest to explain on paper. The website hosting followed. Then the insurance policy. Then the service contract for the lighting rig. The booking calendar was tied to an email address Claire did not have because she had never once asked to be added as an administrator. I kept waiting for guilt to stop me. It did not. What came instead was grief, and beneath that, a cold relief so clean it frightened me. I was not destroying her business. I was removing my name from the parts everyone had agreed to treat as unimportant because I was the one carrying them. There is a difference. I did not expect Claire to understand it right away. Maybe part of me still hoped she would. That was the humiliating part of love. Even after it has been ignored, even after it has become a habit someone else mistakes for infrastructure, it still looks for a door. On Wednesday evening, I put the folder together. Lease on top. Then equipment purchases. Camera body and lenses. Lighting rig. Editing computer. External drives. Microphones. Backdrop system. The things Claire had chosen from catalogs, mood boards, open browser tabs, passing comments at breakfast. I had paid for them because I loved watching her want things before she learned to ask for them. Below that, invoices. Web developer. Accountant. Insurance. Hosting. Software. Maintenance. Then the bank statements. 3 years of monthly transfers from an account in my name alone to the card she used for props, flowers, candles, backdrop materials, all the small beautiful things that made the studio photograph like a dream. I highlighted the transfers because I no longer trusted implication. I left the folder on the edge of the work table. Not hidden, not dramatized, just there. Claire moved it twice over the next 3 days without opening it. I saw the folder shift from the table to the shelf, from the shelf back to the table, as if it were an object out of place rather than an answer waiting for her hand. That was when I understood the pattern more fully than I wanted to. Claire's innocence depended on not looking. Her mother had trained that into her, I think. Not maliciously at first, not in a way a child could name, but thoroughly. Claire had learned young that love in that house could be withdrawn like heat. She had learned to adjust herself before the room got cold. By the time I met her, she mistook that adjustment for kindness. And maybe that was why I had lasted so long beside her. I mistook my own disappearance for devotion. On Friday evening, I did not call her. I wanted to. I wanted to say, open it. I wanted to say, please choose to know. But asking had become another form of carrying. So I left her alone with the folder. The movers were scheduled for 9 the next morning. I signed the inventory forms in advance and stayed away. That is another part Claire's mother would never believe. She would say I avoided the room because I was cowardly or because I wanted Claire to suffer alone. But the truth was simpler. If I had gone, the morning would have become a trial. Her mother would have performed outrage. Ryan would have discovered principles the moment someone else's equipment stopped being available to him. Chloe would have looked wounded enough to make Claire fold. I had seen that machinery work for years. I did not need to stand inside it while my lights came down. So at 9, I sat in my office across town with my phone face down on the desk. I knew the order of removal. Lighting rig first. 4 mounted fixtures. Then camera equipment, computer, hard drives, microphones. The collapsible backdrop system. Cases labeled and padded. Receipts matched to inventory. I imagined the room dimming in stages. Fill light. Kicker. Rims. Then overhead fluorescence exposing the truth underneath the warmth. A studio is a funny thing. People think it is made of taste. Curtains, shelves, candles, a chair positioned to make clients feel safe. But the thing that makes a studio is not taste. It is power. It is liability coverage. It is rent paid before the first of the month. It is equipment that functions, storage that does not fail, software that renews, taxes that do not become a crisis because someone remembered they existed. Remove that, and the illusion loses voltage. What remained when the movers left was what Claire actually owned. A desk, a chair, props, curtains, a rug. I did not feel satisfaction imagining that. Only accuracy. My phone buzzed once around 10:30. A message from Ryan. What the hell is going on? I did not answer. A minute later, Claire's mother called. I let it ring until it stopped. Then again. Then again. By the 4th call, I turned the phone over and watched her name flash across the screen. There was a time when that would have made my stomach tighten. Not because I feared her, exactly, but because her disapproval always entered the marriage through Claire first. It changed Claire's voice, her posture, the speed with which she apologized for things that had not been named yet. But that morning, Claire's mother had no path to me except the one she had refused to acknowledge for 3 years. My name, my phone, my decision. I let it go to voicemail. Claire asked to meet at the coffee shop 2 blocks from the studio. I arrived early because I needed to know I could leave. She came in looking exhausted in a way no filter could soften. Her hair was pulled back. She wore the rings she used to wear when filming, the ones that made her hands look intentional when she adjusted a mug or turned a page. She sat across from me and wrapped both hands around her cup. I went through the folder, she said. All of it. I watched her carefully. I understand now what you've been carrying, she continued. I should have asked. I should have looked at it years ago, and I didn't, and I'm sorry. The words were good. That was the problem. Claire had always been good with atmosphere. Even remorse, in her mouth, knew how to find the right lighting. I'm not asking you to fix anything, she said. I just needed you to know that I actually see it now. I wanted to believe her. For a moment, I almost did. Then I saw the shape of the apology. Not because it was fake. It was not fake. Claire was genuinely sorry. Her eyes were wet. Her voice trembled. Something had cracked open in her, and I could see that. But the apology still had an end point. The end point was me making the feeling stop. Me softening. Me telling her it was all right. Me proving that if she finally looked, even late, the cost would not be irreversible. When do you cry, Claire? I asked. She blinked. What? Not just today. In general. When does it happen for you? She looked down at her hands. I hated myself a little for asking. I hated that I already knew the answer. You're not crying because I was invisible, I said. You're crying because the studio is gone. Because your mother is upset. Because Ryan can't open his business in a space he was never entitled to. Because the feeling is too big now and you want someone to make it stop. Her face tightened. That's not fair. Fair. The family word for pain they did not want to examine. I'm not trying to be unfair, I said. I know you didn't mean for it to happen this way. I've always known that. But that isn't the problem. It was never the problem. She looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time I think she heard what I was not saying. That I still loved her. That love was not enough. That I had spent years making myself useful enough to be kept, and she had mistaken that usefulness for consent. 3 days later, my lawyer sent the separation papers. I did not call Claire first. I did not call her mother. I did not give anyone a chance to rename my boundary before it arrived in writing. There is a kind of mercy in paper. It does not soften itself to avoid tension. It does not say, maybe later. It does not ask the room how it feels. It simply states what is true and leaves everyone else to decide whether truth is cruelty. Claire did not call me when she received the envelope. I noticed that. I do not know whether it meant strength or shock. Maybe both. But for the first time in a long time, the silence between us did not feel like something I was responsible for filling. The final walkthrough was her mother's idea. Of course it was. She called it practical. Items of disputed ownership. Grounds to contest removal of assets purchased during the marriage. She had found a few legal-sounding words and arranged them into confidence. I arrived at the studio before they did. The room looked smaller without the equipment. The ceiling tracks were bare. Pale marks showed where fixtures had been mounted. The shelves still held some of Claire's props, but without the camera, the lights, the computer, the careful machinery of production, they looked less like branding and more like objects waiting to be boxed. I stood by the window with the folder in my hand. Claire came in first, quieter than I expected. Her mother followed, composed in the way generals are composed when they have decided the battlefield is morally theirs. Ryan came behind her. Chloe looked like she wanted to be anywhere else, but not enough to leave. Claire's mother began reasonably. That was always how she began when she intended to be unreasonable. The assets had been purchased during the marriage, she said. There were arguments to be made. She was not suggesting anything extreme. She was simply asking for a conversation before things became final. Surely, after 3 years, some consideration was owed to all of them. All of them. That was the part that almost made me laugh. Not owed to Claire. Not even owed to the marriage. To all of them. The receipts have my name, I said. The card statements have my name. The guarantee on the lease has my name. There's nothing to contest. Her expression tightened. You're being deliberately obstructive. I'm being accurate. Accuracy offended her more than anger would have. Anger could be used. Anger could be framed later as instability, bitterness, ego. Accuracy just stood there, refusing to become convenient. She turned to Claire. The movement was so practiced, I wondered how many times I had watched it without understanding. Claire, she said. Tell him. There it was. The old command beneath the maternal voice. Tell him to be reasonable. Tell him to stop embarrassing us. Tell him your family matters more than his boundaries. Tell him to give us the room back. I looked at Claire and felt something in me brace for the familiar shape of her surrender. Daniel, maybe we can just sit down. Daniel, Mom only means. Daniel, everyone is upset. I had lived inside those sentences for years. I knew their weight. I knew how they placed me gently outside the circle and then asked me not to call it exile. Claire inhaled. Then she said, Mom. Her mother looked at her. What you asked him to do was wrong. The room went still. Claire's voice was quiet, shaking, but it did not disappear. You walked into his studio, she said, into something he built and paid for and maintained for 3 years, and you told him to hand it over like it was something you had the right to redistribute. You spoke to him like he was in the way. Her eyes flicked toward me once, then back to her mother. And I sat there and let you do it. So I was wrong too. I felt no triumph. That surprised me. For weeks, maybe months, maybe longer than I knew, I had wanted Claire to say exactly that. I had wanted the room to hear what I had been trying to make visible. I had wanted her mother's certainty interrupted by a truth she could not rearrange. And now it was happening. Too late. But real. Claire's mother did not yell. She did something worse. She withdrew. I saw the temperature drop through Claire's body. Saw the old childhood reflex rise in her face. Apologize, soften, take it back before the house loses warmth. Her mother had weaponized silence so effectively that even as an adult Claire still flinched before it arrived. For 1 second, I felt sorry for her. Then I remembered every time that reflex had been allowed to cost me. Compassion without accountability is just another way to keep the pattern alive. Ryan muttered something under his breath. Claire said his name once, and he stopped. Chloe looked at her phone. Claire's mother stood in the middle of the stripped room, saying nothing, punishing everyone with the absence of sound. It would have terrified me once, not because it was directed at me, but because I knew Claire would come home carrying it. She would apologize without naming anything. She would ask me to understand. She would call her mother difficult instead of wrong. She would expect me to accept the translation. But that day, the silence had nowhere to go. I signed nothing at the walkthrough. There was nothing left to negotiate. I left with my folder under my arm. Claire did not follow me. I was grateful for that. The divorce papers were signed in separate rooms. That felt appropriate. So much of the marriage had ended in rooms where only one of us was finally willing to look at the documents. My lawyer's office smelled like printer toner and old coffee. No candles. No linen curtains. No carefully warmed light to make difficult things look survivable. Just a table, a pen, and my name printed where my name belonged. I read every page before signing. That mattered to me. For years, I had signed things so Claire would not have to think about them. This time I signed because I had thought about everything. The equipment remained mine. The studio infrastructure remained mine. There was no claim to fight. No grand revenge hidden in the paperwork. Just the legal shape of what had been true all along. I heard later, through my lawyer, that Claire did not contest it. I sat with that information longer than I expected. Part of me was relieved. Part of me hated that relief. Because there is a cruel little hope that survives even after you have done the right thing. It asks whether the other person's growth should count retroactively. Whether late accountability deserves a door left unlocked. Whether seeing the truth eventually should weigh as much as refusing to see it while someone else was still under it. It does not. That is what I had to learn. Claire's regret was real. So was the damage. A month later, I moved into a smaller apartment across the city. No studio. No cream curtains. No shelves arranged to imply serenity. The first night, I sat on the floor with a box of books, a takeout container, and one lamp that made the room look flatter than I liked. The silence felt strange. Not peaceful exactly. Peace was too polished a word for it. Honest, maybe. Bills arrived with only my name on them. And for the first time in years that did not feel like erasure. It felt like ownership. I paid rent. I paid insurance. I paid utilities. No one called it generosity. No one built a brand on top of it. No one stood in a room made possible by my labor and explained that someone else needed it more. Claire's mother probably told people I destroyed the family. I know how stories like hers work. They require villains because victims of their own entitlement have no other language for boundaries. In her version, I was petty, cold, punishing, a man who could not handle being asked to share. Let her have that version if she needs it. It is not mine. Mine is simpler. I love my wife. I helped build her dream. I paid for the floor beneath it, the lights above it, the systems behind it, the quiet, unglamorous machinery that made the beauty possible. I did it willingly until willingness became expected, and expected became owed, and owed became something her mother tried to hand to Ryan as if I were not standing in the room. I did not destroy the studio. I stopped holding it up alone. At night, in the smaller apartment, the rooms stayed quiet. No phone calls from Claire's mother. No emergencies disguised as family. No beautiful space requiring me to vanish in order for someone else to shine. The marriage was over. The studio was gone. But when I looked around at the plain walls, the unpacked boxes, the lamp that did not flatter anything, I felt something I had not felt in years. Not happiness. Not yet. Visibility. The ordinary, uncurated fact of myself. Still there. No longer background infrastructure in someone else's life.